going on this, and you get initiated into this kind of work, then it just becomes a lifestyle, and it's no big deal. And yes, it's a challenge, but everything's a challenge. Your whole life is a challenge.
Hello, hello. Welcome to another edition of Dissolving the Divide. I'm Leslie Powers, here with my co-host Derek Bartolicelli. Hey, Derek.
Hey, Leslie.
And
Hey,
we're
Colin and Melissa.
That's right. We
Hi,
have
guys.
wonderful
Hey.
guests today from Shadow Tech Alchemy, Colin Davis and Melissa Mari. We're going to continue our exploration of the shadow and how important this topic is to dissolving the divide between people in the world and creating a harmonious and free world is our goal here. So welcome.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank
It's great
you.
hanging out with you. It's great to meet you, and we look forward to talking.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
You guys have a great volume of work, and please just introduce yourselves a little, introduce your work and your focus and what's driving you in this work.
Okay. Do you want to start or me? You can. You want me to? Oh, you go.
Ladies
Melissa.
first. No.
Oh, okay.
First, yeah.
So Colin and I are both lifelong musicians, and that's how we met, because Colin is an audio engineer besides having his own band, Vile, which is extreme metal, and I've been a musician doing multiple kinds of music, but metal also. And so we met doing that, but we always had these very long conversations about psychology and working on ourselves.
Red pill
and
stuff.
Spirituality, a lot of red pill stuff.
Right. I think I turned her on to Alex Jones, right?
Yeah, in like 2007
I think,
or
yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we've both been very much quote unquote awake for a long, long time. 9/11 obviously was a big one for us. But and then for me, the whole health industry and all that. But we started hanging out, and our talks got longer and longer, and then we started going out for these walks, and we started to say, well, why is it that we are running these programs or these scripts or these parts of us that are not working out very well, and why do they keep happening over and over again or whatever?
We started psychoanalyzing each other.
Yeah.
And questioning, okay, so here we are. And I think I was, she's a little older than me, but we were in our 40s at the
Right.
time. And we're like, yeah, why are we kind of turning the same cycles? We're not getting what we want in life, or we're still having, various emotional issues or whatever. And what's the cause of that? And basically, it's not that we were both already sort of psychoanalyzing ourselves for years, but
Right.
then when we got together, it was kind of like, wow, we can do this together now. And so that sort of started I think our
It's kind of like alchemy. It's like you
Yeah.
get certain chemicals together that are
Right.
supposed to do a certain
Right.
certain thing.
we made a particular molecule together.
And then
Yeah.
it just started, downloading basically. And then everything that we were talking about and we're figuring out for ourselves, we found synchronicities and then the information which would verify everything that we were talking about. And
Which was what? What were we talking about?
it was about the collective shadow and the
Mhm.
personal shadow and
Right.
how they're connected, and then how as above, so below, so that if you look at everything that's going on in the outer world, you can find the same operation going on in your
There
own
you go.
internal state.
Yeah.
And so
That was kind of an essential element that came to us early on. I think what the way I kind of see our relationship was in those days is since we're both musicians, we're both artists, and in the way that artists collaborate, and when you put artists into the same room and working on the same project, it creates a certain kind of alchemical vessel, and then material is downloaded. People, this
Yeah.
is and so we were basically approaching psychoanalysis from through the from the viewpoint or through the operations of an artist.
I
And
love it.
so yeah, and it's actually, and that's why it's really actually touches the whole Carl Jung and the work of Jung and all of that, because it really is, alchemy is an artistic science, and it kind of requires a scientific mind where you check your results and you try to be as objective as
The
you can.
magician archetype.
Yeah. And then, but then it also requires an artist's mind, and it requires introspection and the ability to be able to
Receive, be
receive.
open.
And Melissa, I think, was acting as a muse for me. And so I sort of was the scribe, and she was kind of the muse. And together we just sort of downloaded everything that was in our book, Shadow Tech. And then
Yeah.
we've just continued that work from there.
And we found that if you look at the titles of all the chapters and what we were talking about, it stayed very much solid through
Yeah,
the
it's
10
interesting
years
because
that-
I thought, well, let me go back and read the book 5-6 years later or whatever, because it came out in 2015, and my language has changed a little bit, and my understanding of certain things has advanced, but the essential elements that are in that book are still the mainstays of our work.
Yeah, we both have, gone through a lot more and grown, and it keeps, these times in your life where you go through these different cycles. They just keep, happening, and you learn different things from that. But if you are in the mindset of self-responsibility, taking responsibility that your inner state is having an effect on the outer world and vice versa, then you can take whatever happens to you that comes to you in your world and utilize it like an alchemist. Yeah.
You can use the synchronicities that show up in your external world as dream symbols, as metaphors to represent movements in your own unconscious.
Right.
I
And
love
so
that
you can
idea.
kind of use the world as like a tarot reading.
Yes, yes. So it's
Yeah.
divination tool for your life through the synchronicities that happen in your
Yes.
day-to-day world. That's fascinating. I talk about synchronicities. Chris Jansen and I were just talking about synchronicities like a few nights
Ah.
ago and did some
Mhm.
recording around it. And I'd like to hear your, I guess, how would you define a synchronicity, and what do you see as what creates it, and how do we interpret or respond to it?
Well, what it's going to be individual, for everyone, what a symbol in your outer world, and you with those whoa moments,
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah, there can be a coincidence, right,
Right.
where you have the appearance of, it's like, okay, I was just thinking about, a hawk came and sat down on the
Mhm.
fence over here, and we were talking about it, and then we got in the car, and a van drove by, and it was like Hawk Services or whatever it is. So you could say, well, that would be a coincidence. But when you had that conversation about the hawk, and then you saw the van, and then you were driving to your mom's house, and then she pulls out the newspaper and she says, "Oh, look at this beautiful picture of this hawk."
Mhm.
And you had already been focusing on that. Now you have a synchronicity. Now you have three different inputs that showed up in alignment with each other, or maybe even on occasion you'll get a fourth or a fifth, or it'll just continue on over the days or weeks, and you'll keep getting this. Now you can kind of you can start to have confirmation bias or whatever. You can start to interject your own fantasy into that, and so it's very wishy-washy, and it's not an objective thing. It's not an objective scientific thing. But when you start to see these kinds of alignments, you can just stop and take that as a dream image and go, okay, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right. And it's fun to play with, though. And what people can do is just spend a day from the minute that you get up. I did this for a while. It was fun. And the minute you're like driving to work, or what is the first thing that stands out to you on your way, you know? And you can start to play with it and find meaning. It's basically a finding deep meaning in your everyday life.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
it's a much more fulfilling way to live, actually.
Yeah.
If like you get into some sort of a conflict, I mean, we can go more
I wouldn't
deeper
call that a
about.
synchronicity.
No, but I'm
this is-
saying you can use things that happen in your life. Say you see something at work where somebody's getting a conflict with you or somebody else, and they start talking about a certain thing that you were just thinking about,
Right.
or
There you go. That's a synchronicity.
yeah.
But yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
it's a way to play with life. And our ancestors were doing this all the time. Everything had meaning. The hawk coming, the squirrels.
We're always in a state of projection. We're always projecting our own, the Jungians say we're projecting archetypal material onto the world. But the synchronicity thing is where you start to see alignments of, across domains. And then that you're supposed to just like with dream analysis, when something shows up in a dream and it has, there's different kinds of dreams and stuff, but in dream interpretation, you're trying to take these symbols and you try to interpret them and learn something about your psyche and what's going on in your unconscious. And you can actually do the same thing just in your waking life. So that's the synchronicity thing.
So it's a good practice
Yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
develop, right, self-awareness,
and it's fun.
yeah.
Well, it is.
a
It's
fun
like
practice.
it's like using divination
Mhm.
Yeah.
techniques, like using tarot or using a pendulum or Ouija board or whatever. It's getting in touch with whatever is behind the construct of reality.
Yeah.
It's trying to tap into that and get information from that source, or you could just say from the collective unconscious. You could say, you're tapping into the collective unconscious.
So really,
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Sorry, Leslie.
oh yeah.
And speaking of synchronicities, I like to, really have the eyes to see and be in tune with these things, and like recognize and realize with those real eyes that the universe is talking to us 24/7 all the time, and through
Right.
whatever kind of mediums of symbols, signs, all these things, sounds, animals, all these things. And yeah, like you mentioned, ancestors were much more in tune with Mother Nature, and practice more of, I wouldn't call it a religion, just, way of life with the animism, if you will.
Yes.
But yeah, it is no coincidence, even though, it's, thanks to Caroline Riley, who we both, had on our, respected platforms in recent times. And she's the one that kind of, referred you guys to us. And so that's great. And
thank you, Caroline.
Yeah, totally.
She's awesome. Yeah.
We had a great talk.
Yeah, and
I look forward to talking to her again.
Yeah, likewise. And we could all catch her and what she's posting on Facebook with her group, Shadow Transformations.
What she's doing is very important.
Oh,
and,
very
and that's, I mean,
that's why we're here. So we're talking about the collective unconsciousness and how it's creating a lot of divides, across the map. It doesn't matter the level of people's awareness. People could be, high level truth speakers or whatever. There's still people that are struggling with that shadow integration or healing the traumas and all these things. And, going back to the red pills and even like since the dawning of the Rona, as I like to call it, COVID, where there's a lot more people that have kind of awoken from whatever terrified slumber, but that was such a traumatizing catalyst for people to
Yeah.
awaken
Mhm.
from. And that was a calculated thing because there's already so many, agents and controlled opposition, COINTELPRO,
Mhm.
whatever people want to call it, that
Yeah.
were already, set up long before that and probably things
Oh, yeah.
calculated for that event. So with the net traps and snares, people are awakening into a lot of different cul-de-sacs of, limited hangouts, if you will, and they're not really, getting the proper guidance to, direct themselves inwardly to, deal with the, integrated knowledge that is necessary and heal the wounds and, comfort
Well,
and,
if
deal with the
yeah,
awakening
that's
process that
totally
hurts.
going on, Derek. But and these catalyzing events like this wake up a lot of people. I mean, 9/11, we were in the 9/11 truth movement, so that's kind of what really got us into this area. But when you're talking about those little isolated pockets or those what did you call them, limited hangouts, it's like we're talking about an external version of the personal unconscious, where the rabbit hole, right? You go down the rabbit hole and you can take all these different little trails in all kinds of different directions, and some of them are dead ends and some of them lead you back over here, and some of them are traps and all of that. That's the personal unconscious too. So you
Mm.
can have sort of this awakening and go on this external hero's journey of trying to find the truth out there in the world. But you can also turn that back around and use and do the internal hero's journey, the alchemical hero's journey, the spiritual alchemist path, and then you can basically do the same thing that you're doing in the truth movement out there. You can do the same thing in here. And one thing I should say though is that is about the, you're always there. You're always going to have conflict, no matter where it is, internally, externally, in the world, with other people, with yourself. You're always going to have conflict. That's part of the natural world. You're always going to have conflict. People are not always going to get along or see eye to eye, and that's always going to be the case. And what and as far as the truth movement goes, it's just going to keep doing its thing. And it's kind of like, to me, it's like a new Reformation. It's like the Protestant Reformation,
Mm.
where people sort of awakened to the mind control of the Catholic Church and said, and then when they started to try to, use different interpretations of the Bible, they saw how punitive the church was. And they said, hey, wait a minute, uh, that, why are you jumping on us? And then the more they pushed back, the more punitive the Catholic Church got, and then that awakened more and more people to the point to where you had this global Reformation, or the whole West, foundation of America, and all of this. And I think we're in another one of those right now. And so that's just going to keep continuing. And there's going to keep being more awakenings and more people pushing back. And you have more and more people grouping into their own little cults, you could say, just like the Protestants. How many different Protestant denominations are there? And so you're going to have all these different little denominations in the truth movement, and that's just going to
Mm.
keep going on, and that's
Mhm.
fine, and that's just nature and all of that. But my point, and I think Caroline's on the same tip here, is that um if you're saying, okay, I'm interested in social justice, I'm interested in truth, I'm interested in healing the world, and I'm interested in being a positive contribution to society, and you're doing that within this movement, the greatest thing I think that you can do is to understand how you are unconsciously actually working against the movement. You are unconsciously
Mm.
working against your own
Mhm.
relationships. You're unconsciously working against yourself.
Yes.
And how are you unconsciously dumping your own evil, your own shadow, into the world unknowingly while you're
Yes.
out there in the world saying, hey, I'm trying to bring coherence to the world and I'm trying to deliver truth to the world. And you are maybe doing that consciously, but at the same time, unconsciously, you don't know how that you're actually destroying the world at the same time.
Yeah,
And
super
so
important point.
so the shadow work and the introspection and the psychological knowledge has to go hand in hand with the external social work,
Yes.
because otherwise it's and the analogy, I keep using this analogy. I'll let Melissa talk, but if you are sick with a disease, right, and then you go out in the world to try to heal other people from the disease, but you yourself are a carrier and you're just spreading the virus or the bacteria or whatever it is, thinking you're out there helping people, and you might be, but you're also infecting people because you haven't healed yourself first,
Right.
or you
The
haven't
wounded
become
healer.
aware at least of how you're
Yeah.
a spreader.
Yeah.
Well, then you're not really helping. You're just creating chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the key is really that you can do both at the same time, right?
Mhm.
So you can keep going out there in the world where your innate passion, you find out what your diamond, that is your gold, your own particular gold that you have to give to the world. And
Mhm.
that is for every human being, that's something,
Mhm.
different.
Yeah.
Mm.
But so you go out there giving your gold, but at the same time, you're looking at your reactions and your projections on other people, and a lot of it's projection
Yeah.
when we get
We can talk about
yeah
that too. Yeah.
yeah we get triggered by something immediately. It could be triggered positively or negatively, but the first thing to do is look at the trigger and why am I have that much emotion from
Mhm.
this person or what they're saying or what they're doing,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
pull it back into your own
Yeah.
process.
Anytime you're
Yeah.
triggered by somebody else emotionally, that's the whole principle of shadow projection is that, and I could actually use this because Leslie, before we started, you said you had read my article about the shadow. What it was, I didn't remember what it was called. The latest article on the website, and I kind of broke up all these different understandings of the shadow from Jung, and shadow projection is an unconscious, instinctual kind of knee-jerk reaction that that our psyche uses. It's very primitive and ancient, and it's almost laughable, really. But our egos, our conscious state of mind, which sort of are the totality of our view of how we think about ourselves and how we see the world, our worldview, our self-image, and all of that that's within the conscious mind and the ego has to be protected. If it's not protected, you know what can happen when people are having an emotional breakdown and they're very fragile. You know, it, your ego is fragile, and everyone's is, and so we protect ourselves from our own from the realization of our own faults, our own weaknesses. We protect ourselves from old memories and the leftovers of childhood trauma and
Mhm.
anything that could be damaging to our egos. We
Mhm.
protect ourselves from it by, one, denying it. We repress it. It's held back behind a veil of cognitive dissonance, and so it stays in the unconscious. But when some aspect of ourselves that's quote unquote dark, um, is when we witness it in another person, and when it resonates with our own repressed material, it triggers that material in us. So, it's very, very common in politics or whatever that somebody sees a particular politician or whatever, and, oh, I just hate him or her, how they are when they do this and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Well, you've never met that person and all of that. So what's going on there? is that that aspect of that other person is triggering a similar aspect that's in your own unconscious that really needs to be looked at, and that you're holding it back, and it really needs to come up into your ego, and you need to slowly um, dissolve that and integrate that, they say. But you haven't done that yet. You didn't know that you need to do that. And so what ends up happening is the psyche projects that onto the other person. So the other person is seen as narcissistic. Look how vain and narcissistic that person is. Or it can be very simple stuff of look how ugly they are, or look how I don't like the way they talk, or this, that, and the other. Anything that's negative and judgmental about another person, if it's emotionally tinged, and especially if it comes back, and you end up noticing those kinds of things in people commonly, well, that is because you've touched some shadow material that needs to be integrated. And so now you have thrown your shadow, you've projected it onto another person, and now they can carry it for you. Now they're the ugly one, they're the evil one, they're the greedy one, they're the narcissistic one. And meanwhile, you get a pass, and you don't have to look at your own narcissism. You don't have to look at your own selfishness. You don't have to look at your own self-esteem issues. So it's a very simple sort of just, throw it on the other person so I don't have to face it in myself.
Yeah.
And we're all doing it all the time to each other. And it's just sort of an immune reaction to protect the egos, to protect the self-image of ourselves. And it's going on unconsciously everywhere. And, politics, for example, should be about governing, and it should be about debating issues and finding out what people in different demographics want and having representatives and all that. But look at our politics. It's just shadow projection games.
Yeah.
And so you can see how destructive, and it gets so destructive. And that, just last thing is that when a whole bunch of people identify another person or another group as negative, they demonize another person or group, and then they get together, well, then that they become a very powerful force, and that's how wars are started. That's how genocides happen, right?
So
we
mob mentality is cultivated, all that jazz. Yeah.
So an individual in their projective state, and projecting outward to a villain, creating a villain of some sort, then can connect up with other people with similar mind states, and that becomes a greater power, right?
Look at TDS syndrome,
Trump derangement.
Derangement syndrome is a perfect example of that, of how and the Nazis were a good example.
They did it. All these, anytime you find one of these examples of where there was a genocide, where there was some kind of political atrocity, and you go back and you look at what was in the minds of the individuals who were promoting those efforts, you'll find that they were carrying a shared shadow projection.
Yeah, which was talked about during Convid a lot, mass formation psychosis, right?
A new term. Yeah.
But that's like the act of the group getting together once they've all projected onto this thing, or then it becomes a psychosis. Yeah, mass formation.
It's very cathartic for people to kind of come together. And Matthias Desmet, who uses that term mass formation, it describes it very well. But Jung was describing it, 70, 80 years ago or more. But it becomes very cathartic for people to come together around a shared enemy, and then to collectively project their own darkness onto that other group, and then get together and then attack that other group. Because, there's so much sort of, you could say, benefit behind it, because everybody getting together as a group under a common banner, under a common cause, feels good. People throw away their little minor differences when they come together under a common cause. They have a shared enemy now. They have purpose. They have meaning in their lives. They're being, there's this shared enemy that we now have to go after. All of our warrior instincts turn on, and it becomes an addictive, collective, mass formation, a formation of well, that's mass. I think Robert Malone put the word psychosis on it. Mass formation psychosis. It becomes a group psychosis, and then Jung also pointed out that when we come together as a group and we adopt a group belief system, we actually lower our consciousness down to a primal level. The individual is always more introspective, and their thoughts are much more nuanced than the group is. And
Like
so
the Hermit card.
well,
Going back to the
what do you
tarot.
mean?
As the individual who's introspective and
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Out of the
Yeah.
crowd and all that.
Yeah, and if you go to if any affinity group that you're part of, let's say use a church or whatever it is, it could be a corporation that has this corporate culture. You stand up and you say, hey, hey everybody, I was looking at our new policy and blah blah blah, and I think this and I think that and stuff like that. Most likely, people are going to say, sit down and shut up. Look, we're all in this. This is the company we work for. This is what it is. This is what was decided. There's nothing we can do about it. So let's just go along to get along. And then, and then over time, as societies go into these cycles where the periodic cycles where they devolve, then that group consciousness, it becomes safe to be part of the group.
Right.
And then but we collectively get to project our own shadows, and then we collectively get to destroy the world.
Yeah. And while justifying your behavior. Yeah.
While justifying our behavior.
Yeah.
And the reason why this is hard to pull back from too is because what he was talking about is that it's a way of the psyche to protect itself, right?
Yes.
And so there's going to be your own personal trauma. It could be just developmental trauma. It could be epigenetic trauma or some sort of experience that is in your background, in your psyche, that you haven't wanted to, or you've been protecting yourself to face. And this is where the real shadow work can actually start to happen, is if you can just now with social media and being online, you have a great opportunity to start to look at the things that you react to and have a negative compulsion or even a positive compulsion, pull it back and start to self-examine why it is that you are feeling that way.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a great way to start, and it's safe.
It is.
It's very safe.
You're totally right about that, about using social media that way. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to just maybe to summarize how I understand like the crux of what you're saying. And with the word like mass formation psychosis, the word psychosis is implying that the conclusions are not based in reality, that there's an aspect of distortion and the assessment of reality is inaccurate, on a mass scale.
Like it's manufactured, it's not organic or whatever.
Right. That it's being created in sense by a storyline that comes from the shadow. Right. And that the group dynamic in a way protects the individual from feeling the pain of the shadow. It's like this group, a veil. The shadow is a veil of the truth, and the truth is could be painful or frightening. And so it's like creates extra fortification for a person who's really avoiding their own shadow, their own pain internally. And it can make it harder for an individual to see the truth because they're in the comfort of this group belief system, right? That's inaccurately reading the world. And I like what you're saying, Melissa, about how can a person start to recognize that they're in this sort of inaccurate interpretation of the world, through noticing, through looking inward, right? So in taking the lens off all the people you're annoyed with and triggered by in the world and the causes that you're taking up, but taking a moment to reflect back on your own reactions to people and things, right? And then what?
When you first, you need to know that you have a tendency to project, that we all do. We need to know that. We need to know that when we're triggered, we can talk about positive shadow projection too, golden shadow projection, where we idolize someone else. But just on the dark side, when you're triggered negatively by something, and especially when you're chronically triggered by that same person or event or information, then you just have to know that, okay, this is touching something in me that I'm not comfortable with yet. There's something about that person or that information that is actually in me, and I need to get in touch with that, and I need to try to find out what that is. Like Donald Trump is a great one, because it's in our present day reality right now, and he's a good one to use. Whatever it is about Donald Trump that you can't stand, there's something that thing is related to something in you that you need to dig out.
Yeah.
And so if you had kind of an alpha male father who you think did you wrong or abused you or abandoned you or whatever, and then you look at this other strong alpha male guy out there and you think, God, this guy is such a jerk and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. You have to dig back and you have to go, well, is this the first one of these kinds of men that I didn't like? Or was I triggered by other men like that in the past? And what is it about Trump that reminds me of my own father or my uncle or my grandfather or whatever? And how am I maybe projecting the negative father archetype onto Trump?
Yeah.
I'm so triggered by him, and I follow groups of other people who are also triggered by him, and we have a grand old time slamming him online and stuff like that. What's at the core of this?
You could also do the other side of that too. Everyone who thinks that he's savior and is going to save the world and all that, they're projecting the good king onto him.
Yes, they're projecting the positive father archetype who's going to come in like a good daddy and save everybody from evil in the world.
Right.
And that's also very dysfunctional, because then we give up our own power.
Yeah.
Look at the Q movement or whatever that was around, where Trump's got it taken care of, and Trump and the team are going to do everything, and we just need to stand back.
Everybody knows that was a psyop now, but people, people that were in it, or
So you can be negatively triggered when you're projecting your shadow, or you can actually you can idolize somebody. And wherever you find just a natural movement of emotional energy towards a person or a type of information, then that's touching something in your unconscious that you need to look at.
So that's the golden shadow.
Yeah, the golden shadow is when you idolize other people and you say, look how, he's so smart. Oh, he's so handsome. Oh, he
knows
strong.
The truth. He has
He has the truth. And
all
of this. No, that's you. You're incredibly strong. You are incredibly wise. You have very important answers, right? But you're not owning that genius in yourself. You're throwing it on him or on some other person or some other movement to handle it for you.
So if you're projecting that, kind of golden shadow outward and picking a savior, does that then indicate that there's some dark shadow of material to work on in yourself, right? That you're like sidestepping in a way.
Well, that's
It's a balance because, you know, we all are learning from each other, and we do naturally project onto people in our lives, teachers, mentors. This is just part of the hero's journey. But if you are,
or I'd say that's just part of this way the psyche works.
yeah,
Yeah.
but if you're taking it to the point where this person, you know, is the only one that has truth, or you're just obsessed with
Yeah,
them,
that's how you know.
Yeah.
Obsession.
Okay.
then I would look at it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That there's
wherever
likely a
you're
wound
obsessed.
internally, you know,
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Well,
Interesting.
the thing about the golden shadow is that, you know, it's, I think I even said this quote in that article, is that it can be just as difficult to own your own brilliance as it can be to own your own wounds and faults and weaknesses.
Yeah, very true.
And because we Jungians talk about this a lot, is that you know, when you get in touch with your own genius, when you, okay, whatever it is, you're an athlete, you're a musician, you're a researcher, whatever it is, and you're kind of having a peak moment, you're having a peak year, right? Or the peak of your career, or whatever it is. You're really, your life, your ego and your whole life is aligned with, in the Jungian terminology, it's your big S self. It's your self with a capital S. It's your divine essence, your highest potential, your genius, your daimon. And when you're aligned with that, you are on fire. And this is like the, you know, the myth of Icarus or whatever, flying up next to the sun and everything. And you're thinking, wow, how great am I? Look at this. I'm flying. You know, I'm just magnificent. I'm on fire. Everybody knows I'm how brilliant and beautiful and great I am. I'm getting all this positive feedback and all of this. But everybody knows, after getting, you know, get into their 30s or 40s, you had enough crashes to know that if you get too close to your own genius and you start thinking, what a good boy or what a good girl am I? How great am I? You know, you're very close to a fall. Because when things are that bright, you can't even, you know, you're actually, you're in the light, but you're also blinded by the light, blinded by your own light. And you are very close to making a misstep and having a crash. And you can, you know, you can fall down very hard and hurt yourself very bad. And that's part of the drama of life. And she said the hero's journey. And then we look at newspapers and tabloids and stuff to go track other people's rises and falls. Right? You know, Brad Pitt was so great or whatever, and now look, he's a drug addict or whatever, living on the street, Johnny Depp or whoever.
Yeah.
And so we all instinctively know that that's the case. And so touching your gold can be very dangerous. And then you will also be seen by other people who are jealous, and you'll be attacked. You don't know instinctively if you can handle that kind of quote unquote grandiosity. And so a lot of people choose unconsciously to just kind of lay low and just kind of do their own little thing in life. And this is my own little thing, and don't talk about it in such great terms or anything. And don't get too inflated, what they say in the Jungian world. Because if you get too inflated, then you could possibly pop, and it's going to hurt. And everybody wants to avoid that. And so people just instinctively kind of stay small in life. And because touching your gold is going to hurt. And you know, the way we should navigate this is with consciousness. And so when you're
Mm.
feeling like you're in touch with your genius and things are going well and you're on it, you should go with it, right? You should go with it, but you should go with it consciously. Not get quote too full of yourself. Don't get
Mhm.
too inflated. You have to stay humble, but at the same time, you got to ride the wave. You got to get on there. You got to surf the wave. You got to get up on the wave. You got to stand up. You got to try for it. You got to do that. But then you also know that if I do slip and fall, that will be okay, because then I'll learn from that. And then I'll come back and I'll try it again a little bit differently the next time. And so if you can move through life and touch your goals, but just be humble and conscious about it, then yes, you're going to crash and all of that, but each of those crashes is going to be a learning experience, and you're just going to come back greater and greater and greater,
Yeah.
and you're actually going to develop wisdom that way.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's the way you want to work with your golden shadow.
Through experience. And if you stay too safe in your little, hermit cave, you're not going to get those experiences to learn from. Yeah, I love that
Especially when you're nice and
description.
so yeah, it's a great description, Colin. And I just wanted to add to that, Leslie. Sorry if I cut you off
You're
there.
good.
But yeah, a lot of people are sitting back, comfortable, living vicariously through, these people that they idolize, going back to what you were saying. And so, yeah, it sucks that people are not, reaching their full greatness just based off of that complacency almost in a sense. And it's kind of like that stagnant consciousness, unfortunately. And so, yeah, I wanted to really reel it back into what, our show is about in regards to dissolving the divide and
Yep.
any kind of divisions that you've really observed, especially through these eyes, going through the really intense and arduous shadow work that takes your life, your lifetime to go through this. It's a daily operation, as I like to say. You can go through alchemical processes many times in one single day. It's nothing to be
Yeah.
like anyone to be virtue signaling about. And like
Right.
you said in different other videos that, there's people that are kind of, talking the talk, not necessarily walking the walk. And like some people are talking about it and haven't even really dipped their full feet into these deep pools and oceans of awareness and that subconscious inner work that people have to go through. And yes, there's different
Yeah.
ways to put it, but yeah, I'll let you have the floor on these things.
Yeah, because it's not easy. It's tough, and you have to develop a very strong we talk about the archetypes a lot. Um Robert Moore's model of the warrior, magician, lover, king,
Yeah.
queen.
Right.
And in order to really start working on yourself and doing the deeper shadow work, you really have to develop an extremely strong warrior and magician.
Right.
You have to be able to have an immense amount of will to allow yourself to go into these areas that are extremely uncomfortable. We have a few different practices that we've done over the years. One of it's emotional processing, where when you get triggered by something and it's a deeper trigger, instead of distracting yourself or doing something else or blowing up, you go into the feeling, the emotional content of it, and you allow it to metabolize through your body. It's kind of it's a somatic practice, and it's very easy to do, but at first it's very difficult because your emotional body is incredibly powerful. And if you haven't been allowing these deeper emotions, the deeper traumas to come up through your emotional body, it can be more intense than physical pain.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to will yourself to allow yourself to feel these things.
Yeah.
And so that's one of them. You know, it's and it never stops, really. You think you get to a certain stage of, oh yeah, I've done all my work, and you know, everything's working out great or
Right.
whatever. And then you get into a relationship, a new
Mhm.
relationship with somebody. And then when you get in a relationship with somebody, you're basically you're projecting each other's gold,
Yeah.
Right.
animus,
Animus projection at first.
or it doesn't matter what sex you are or anything,
Right.
you still do these projections.
Right.
And then at the same time, you're also attracting your shadow parts, all your, we used to call it the virus a lot. We use the term
Yeah.
virus as the metaphor for all this repressed shadow energy. And so, you know, this is like a big thing for people, is that when they start getting involved in relationship or family, all this stuff is going to come up.
Yeah. I'm
Right.
glad you brought
Oh,
that up.
Right.
Yeah.
And every day you can be working on your shadow. We've used
Yeah.
our relationship as a way to work on ourselves, and it's been very, very challenging, but very healing at the same
Yeah.
time.
Once you just kind of know that whenever I get, whenever I become possessed, right, by something, I become obsessed with something, I
Yeah.
become, I start overflowing in any way, then you just know that, okay, well, I'm going to keep an eye on myself. I'm going to start. And if you have some kind of, this is why I recommend everybody kind of just get some basic Jungian education so that they can kind of have a basic formula for kind of, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what I'm projecting. Here's what I'm repressing. Here's kind of how things work. And you don't have to use that system, but that I think is the most holistic system of psychology. And you just kind of, now you can kind of just go through life aware and self-observant, and don't get just don't get just kind of taken over.
Yeah.
But going back to what Derek was saying about people not talking the talk but not walking the walk, that is, like Melissa said, it's because it's very hard. And I think also what we're ideas people, all of us on this call, and people who are listening to this, we're ideas people. And so it's very, and we're in this world where everybody can kind of be their own guru, be their own author, their own podcaster. Everybody kind of has this. All these things have been democratized, and
You can just
so
buy it and be like some kind of professional, like it's a
Yeah.
pseudo thing, like, yeah.
You can, and so it's pretty easy to get involved in something. Let's say get involved. You can either get involved in a subject and read a bunch of books, or listen to a lot of lectures, and then just get on YouTube and start teaching people and become a teacher of that subject and just kind of regurgitate what you've read. Or you can join a movement of some kind and kind of find out what are the precepts of this movement and learn the fundamentals, and then you can teach that the basics of what's behind the movement. You can proselytize for the movement, and so but what ends up happening is, like what you're saying is that we end up talking about and putting energy on ideas and behaviors that we haven't really analyzed that closely.
And would you
And
say also it sounds like you're saying like these people haven't fully experienced them either, like had personal
They haven't
experience and gone
fully.
through that, right? It's one thing to read
Well,
about
it's.
it and to, you know,
I mean, we can kind of go a little
but yeah,
bit maybe
sorry.
into kind of this. I mean, I kind of don't want to. I'm trying to, and with all of every time I write about shadow stuff or whatever, I don't. I mean, we
It's
talked about
it's
Donald
kind of
Trump,
beside the point, but yeah.
and I'm not. I'm not myself offended by Donald Trump, but he's a great one that
Good
to
example.
use. Yeah, a great example. But I always try to keep things as general as possible because these kind of things are universal, and I don't want to kind of pigeonhole any group or whatever. But when people start talking about truth, this is where truth is. Um, and then here are the principles for living a proper life in this way or another, and these are the key elements that you need to know, and if you follow these things, then you will be living a righteous life and all of that kind of stuff. Most of that is people who are looking for a tribe. They're looking for some kind of a constitution to follow because it's very difficult to kind of live by your own terms, live by your own rules, and constantly analyze everything and figure out, okay, where am I with this? Where am I with this? And really root back the external world into your own mind and heart and go, where am I with? It's very difficult to do that. It's much easier to just kind of find a 10 commandments to follow and just kind of say, I'm following these 10 commandments and everybody else should follow these 10 commandments. And let's just do this. And I talk about these 10 commandments and this is what it is.
Yeah, not a lot of people. I mean, there are people that do need a tribe and do need to follow. This is,
Yes.
biological in our,
Yeah.
look at history of humanity. There always ends up being leaders and followers, and different people have different capacities.
Yeah.
What are the three in the Gnostic religion?
Oh.
Yeah, there's. This is kind of
I can tell you
interesting.
that, but I was just going to say to help expand on that other thought is that just think about this archetype of individualist and collectivist, right? The one who does their own thing, thinks their own thoughts, and makes their own decisions without anybody else's input or with not too much. And then there's the person who just says, just give me something to follow. What group am I in? What are my 10 commandments? And what's my ethics, my code of ethics that I'm supposed to follow? And what's my schedule? And just put me in something safe so I can just live and have that. Well, nobody is a complete collectivist and nobody is a complete individualist.
Correct.
But people, depending on their temperament, their personality type, tend to kind of fall towards one or the other. And we both have those elements in us. So it is true that people who tend to have a little bit more collectivism in their personality type are going to be more comfortable just kind of finding the movement, the group, the truth of that group, and kind of just going along with that. And if we didn't have that, we couldn't have organized societies.
Yeah. There's a certain necessity to live in order to live together, to have some agreed ways of behaving toward each other, right?
Yes.
That's right. And just because somebody doesn't have this intense kind of problem-solving magician mind, just doesn't mean that. I mean, just think how many does a woman who's raising 4 children, who's got all that on her plate, really need to be studying, Adam Smith and capitalism and philosophy and psychology and stuff and all that? No, she just needs to, have her life somewhat ordered so that she can have a regular, stable environment to raise healthy children, right?
Yeah.
And so that's not her place to do all. Not everybody is
Mhm.
a total individualist that needs to be figuring everything out and then
Mhm.
and finding the truth and then sharing that with the
Mhm.
world. That's a certain archetype. That's a certain personality type. And so we're going to have people that are looking
Mhm.
for just where do I fit in and what do I
Yeah.
need to know and all of that. And then let me speak on behalf of this group to help the
Yeah.
world. That's just going to be there. And then there's going to be the
Mhm.
individualists that need to be kind of problem solving and kind of cutting into that and going, well, maybe we need to make a change here, or maybe this is true, or maybe this is not
Mhm.
true. And challenging and evolving the system all the time.
Yeah, I think the reason I brought up the thing about the Gnostics, what's interesting about that is through the 21st century, it kind of seems like there are more people who are running this more individualistic, um, kind of more of a spiritually based way of viewing reality
Mm.
and a base more people that are on the individuation path,
Yeah.
that are really seeing beyond the matrix, so to speak.
Mhm.
And
The
Mhm.
spiritual red pill people, right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
like you guys,
yes.
and probably the
Mhm.
people that are listening to this, a kind of a
Mhm.
new
Mhm.
Gnosticism.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
explain the three type of people through the Gnostics, because it's
I'm
interesting.
not a total expert on Gnosticism, but I had to, I studied it pretty intensely for a few months just so I could kind of figure out what is this, and where does
Mhm.
this come from and all of that. There's all these different Gnostics. It's a pre-Christian it's a pre-Christian spiritual uh, movement, and there was different versions of it, and it's probably happening around the first few centuries AD,
Mhm.
and a lot of these Gnostic principles made it into Christianity, but then they kind of the esoteric Western tradition carries more of these, or kind of puts them on top. But I think it might have been the Valentinians, but they're one of these Gnostic groups had a sort of a tiered system, and I don't know if I agree with this or not, but
It's interesting.
they said most people are hylic or a hyletic. I think it's hylic,
Mhm.
and they're basically like advanced animals, and they're just biological beings who are reproducing and eating and working and going about their day. These would be collectivists, right? These are ultra collectivists, I guess, or I guess you would say that. And the people that just doing their thing, and they don't look behind the surface, they don't ask too many questions, and they just do their thing, and they can't be awakened.
Mhm.
And then there's what they call the psychics. The psychics are halfway in between, and they can kind of either devolve down to that first level, um, or they can work on themselves, and then they can go to the next level, the higher level, which were called pneumatics.
Mhm.
Of course, the Gnostics thought that they were the pneumatics, and so they were the enlightened ones. And so these are the few enlightened ones that can see behind the veil of reality. And this would be in the Eastern tradition. This would be people who are actually enlightened, and
Mhm.
Well, also who are on that
or who
particular
are
path.
on that
Like-
path and dedicated to, let's say
Mhm.
that, yeah,
And
Like the
dedicated to that path.
bodhisattvas,
Yeah,
Yeah, but this is what I see in a lot of people now, more than ever, is more people like that. That's why podcasts like yourself and all this is getting into more of the quote unquote mainstream, because there's more people awakening naturally who were born to be on this particular
yeah, it seems like it.
individuation journey.
Yeah.
Obviously psychedelics have something to do
Oh, yeah.
with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think so.
There's just, it seems like it's another movement, kind of like the 60s, but a
Yeah.
kind of more advanced version of that. But I
More
personally
DNT.
just, yeah, more intuitively see this as just the way that that evolution happens. This is what, the planet wants,
Yeah.
is the evolution of our species. And I feel that that's why more people are on this path now. So that's, I hear in different groups about, that there's people around that don't have any souls, that they're just
Right.
walking. And that's kind of the same kind of thing as what the Gnostics were
Yeah.
picking up on. And what's also interesting about that period, that there were all these different individual Gnostic groups, just like how we see all our different truth and movements and different subgroups that all have their own little special thing that they have, and it was the same
You're
thing
talking to your mic.
going on there too, right? It was
Yeah.
like, the same dynamic was going on way back then.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same. But every time you have a spiritual movement, right, there's always the insiders who are like, we have the truth. We're red pilled. We know what the spiritual reality is. You guys out there are asleep, and we need to wake you up.
Yeah.
And that, whether it's through through Christianity, or whether it's this or that religion, that's always going on. And now we're kind of in this secular world, and this is kind of, the whole truth movement is kind of it's kind of a, like I said, it's a new like another reformation,
Yeah.
where we're throwing off the church, we're throwing off the status quo,
Right.
and then we're awakening to what was hidden, and what was hidden behind this forced collectivism.
Hmm.
And there is this tendency, this sort of fundamentalist tendency that is in people, to try to, okay, hurry up and figure out what the truth is, follow the truth, and throw that on everyone, and this is what it is, and this is who you should be
Hmm.
into
Yeah.
and voting for, and this is what, and
Yeah.
but I always want to remind people that there's a look at Donald Hoffman, the physicist, or look at Bernardo Kastrup, the philosopher, to understand the subjective nature of perception, and that there is no objective reality. If there, now let's imagine there is an objective reality, there is an actual solid universe, but we won't ever know what it is, because we're all living through our own models, we're living through our own projections. And like what Hoffman describes is that the human body and brain and psyche did not actually evolve to show us what the objective truth is. It evolved to show us a model of the world that works for us biologically, so that we can survive and thrive on planet Earth. And so how we process, how we see, how we imagine, everything is our own particular sort of AI operating system that we all share, because we're 99.9% the same genetically across the whole world. So we can all look at the world and go, hey, the grass is green, right? That's a tree, right? That's hard. That rock hurts when you drop it on your toe. We can all have these basic agreements at the biological level, but beyond that, there's so much variability in the psyche, and there's so much variability in human in the environment, that and our different psychosocial stages of development and stuff. Go to an African pygmy and try to tell them about your philosophy of what truth is and the way the world works, and they're just going to laugh at you.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between our capacity, our technology as a human and the limitations of our sensory system and our perceptions, and then the variations in people's consciousness. And there may be some reality, some truth to this that there are different that people have different, almost like categorizations, of where they are in terms of perception and access to the universal truth.
Different
But
personality types.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
noticed that in the grocery store
language
yesterday.
yeah,
myself.
but I think
Yeah.
ultimately, though, being humble in that way, also sort of brings out that there is some sort of bigger energetic force, that operates in predictable ways or identifiable patterns that we can observe, and we can, as we start to see ourselves, right? When you talk about looking inward and seeing the shadows, you can start to link causes and effects.
Yeah.
And start to see that in the realm of living in three-dimensional world on this planet, that there are some principles, that we can, that are observable, that lead to either chaos or order. And I think
Yeah.
that, this paradigm of seeing this relationship of correspondence between the collective
Yes.
and the individual is
Right.
identifying one of these bigger universal principles, or if you want to call them laws, like hermetic principles or
Yeah.
laws,
Oh, yeah.
you can, right? So
Right.
I think that there people are seeking tribe. I think it's a biological need for protection, that we are interdependent. We can't survive just, alone in our physical life. We need each other.
Right.
And that there is a need for some kind of mutual understanding of how to get along, right? And like you
Yes.
said, Melissa, that the drive for a constitution, right, is sort of a human desire for safety when
Mhm.
living amongst people. And so then I think the problem is seeing that the written constitution or the human-made interpretation of law is the end all be all, right? Because that can be abused. But where is the freedom, I think, is in recognizing nature as the ultimate teacher, right? And seeing these patterns and learning that there are certain things to do or not do, mostly to not do, in order to live harmoniously on this planet. I think we could agree, that, murdering people to steal their money, is not a way, is a wrongdoing. It's not going to create peace or harmony. When you're approaching this, are you staying away from words like right or wrong? Are you staying away, from the word truth? How are you approaching those concepts?
Oh,
Well,
there was a lot you said in there, and I
Yeah. Oh,
totally
yeah.
dig everything that you said, and I get the gist of what you're saying there. And you talked about the law of correspondences, take us back to the Kabbalion, right? And the Hermetic principles, and it if you go back to these are principles of metaphysics, right? That are just sort of these underlying, you say, let's say natural laws or whatever. And then let's take the Western Hermetic principles, which I think a lot of them are very well put in the Kabbalion, for example. And then you go over to the East to the Chinese, who have also been doing this same work. And they have their descriptions are different. The way they use elements in a different way to describe similar, but also kind of different in the way the principles are fleshed out through the ancient Chinese psyche. And so it's like, I think we should try to get down to these base principles as best we can. But even when you take the most that kind of philosophical strain of the West, trace it from Aristotle and Plato and through the Stoics and all that kind of stuff and all of that, and you put that on the table, and then you go over to the Chinese and say, well, where are your Hermetic principles? And they say, well, ours, and you put those two on paper and stuff like that, you're going to go, oh, well, there's some fundamental differences here.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, yeah, because we have we also have a 3,000, 4,000 year old civilization, and we've kind of evolved a little bit differently from you, and our psyche is interpreting the world a little bit differently from you. And so you realize that, yeah, it seems that there are these natural principles that are in the universe. But it seems like our ability to be able to get down to them and say, this is exactly what they are, we don't have that ability. And so what happens is that civilizations are formed out of the cleanest versions of these natural laws that we can come up with, right? And we have the cleanest versions. And you go back to let's go in America, back to the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, and that's a lot of what's in the Constitution and what was in that original culture of those people in that time. And they were trying to do this. What are these foundational principles that lead to morality and lead to a healthy society? And those foundational principles are viewed through, this is where integral theory comes in and it could be very helpful to people, because Ken Wilber took a lot of this from spiral dynamics, but those two theories together, they show how if you go down through history, people have been evolving through various psychosocial stages. Like Derek pointed out, an animism perspective. And when you're fully in the animistic worldview, and that's being mirrored by your culture, by your people all around you, and you're engaging in these rituals to contact these spirits, and these spirits are showing up in your dreams or even in your hallucinations in your waking state, and they're telling you these are the ways to live, and this is where right and wrong is, and this is where good and bad is and stuff. They are tapping into the same principles as Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine and these people, and the Freemasons and these people and the Gnostics or whoever. They're tapping into the same principles, but they're coming through different psychic filter sets.
Yes. Okay, I agree with that.
We have to recognize that different cultures, different peoples are at different psychosocial development stages, and they're seeing these natural laws through different filter sets.
Yeah, I love that
and
filter.
None of us is seeing them clearly. We're all just doing our best at our level of development to be able to see what these things are. So if there is an objective world out there, and there are objective natural laws and rules and stuff, and we can see there is cause and effect and there is repeatability, it's easier to kind of see it in the material world and go, I drop a rock and I drop a bowling ball, and they arrive at the same time, or the wind gets involved, and study things in the physical world. But once you start getting into the world of psyche and how and the collective version of that we call culture, now you're wrapping up these laws of nature are being interpreted through our very amorphous and strange filter set that we call the psyche. And different people are at different stages in all of this. And so the best really thing that we can do is we can form societies of people who are on the same page and see the world similarly enough so that we can all get along and have a nice life together, and say, all right, this is the truth as best as we can determine it from our time and place.
Mhm.
And let's live by that, and let's constantly try to question it and update it
Yeah.
and try to find the truth. But we have to recognize that these people over here 3,000 miles away, they have a different filter set, and
Mhm.
they're going to be interpreting that same natural truth differently.
It can be your neighbor has a
And-
different
and it can
filter,
Oh,
even just be
definitely.
right there with your
you
neighbor.
know.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
the way you described that was really, really brilliant, I think. And it just highlights that we all need to learn, to be open-minded.
Yeah.
And be very aware of our thoughts and where they come from in a way,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And feelings.
Our
Yeah.
culture is very kind of exoteric and expansive, and it's been about building stuff, very masculine, you could say.
Yeah.
And the East has been more collectivist and more
Mhm.
introspective. And I think it's time for Western people, I think this is naturally happening, to start
Mhm.
to become more introspective and more questioning about
Yeah.
their own internal operations, their own filter
Mhm.
sets,
Mhm.
and start
Yeah.
communicating that with each other. And so that's kind of where we're at. What we're kind of all about is
Yeah.
understanding our own filter sets, coming up with if there are any kind of tools that we can use for understanding
Mhm.
ourselves, and then
Mhm.
sharing those with other people, because we want to psychoanalyze. We're psychoanalyzing each other. We
Right.
want you to psychoanalyze us. We want to psychoanalyze you. We want us
Mhm.
all to
Mhm.
be sort of using
Yeah.
some common language and start kind of doing that so that we
Yeah.
can stop unconsciously kind of just flopping around all over
Right.
each
Yeah,
other.
it's just consciousness,
Yeah.
and
It's too bad it's all
behind
fragmented, yeah.
yeah, and behind consciousness is love.
Yeah.
I hate to be so simple about it,
Mhm.
but my most recent cycle has broken my ego down even more to a pulp, and
Mhm.
it comes everything is created from love.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
really is.
Yeah.
And the mind,
It
consciousness,
gets in the way of that.
so
Yeah.
we can and we will and we are all starting to learn this. And I do feel that this is the direction that we're heading, where we all are more conscious of our internal states, and we start operating in our outer world with that going on 24/7.
Mhm.
And then I do feel that naturally we will create, for our grandkids and great grandkids, a better world. It's just,
Yeah.
it's naturally
Things are on
happening.
track, in other words, huh?
Yes, things
Yeah.
are on track. That
That-
I
that-
do feel that way, just
agree.
from this
That's a
discussion.
good meditation, actually, to just say, okay,
Mhm.
despite everything I've been saying and thinking, let me just imagine that everything that's going on planet Earth right now is exactly the
Yeah.
way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even the most heinous kinds of
Mhm.
acts of death and
Mhm.
destruction and
Yeah.
chaos, that's actually a good place to actually go at some point, is into Jung's understanding of the dark side of the self and all of that,
Yeah.
that evil, so to speak, is actually part of the formula,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that
yeah.
everything is working the way it's supposed to be. And then just kind of sit in that for a while. Now, what are you going to do?
Yeah, the first chapter of Shadow Tech talks about that, the 0 and the 1.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, it's an interesting, again, I see this as a complex, like a bit brain challenge, right? Of
Yeah.
being able to be in a place of radical acceptance for what is,
Yes.
and recognize that there is this evolutionary possibility for something so much better, if through knowledge and self-awareness and aligning with love, that we're all beings in places of choice. And when we can understand ourselves and the trajectory of the world and the dynamics that are moving it in one direction or another, that we can have an influence on like driving the ship towards a place of love and unity, and that is important. I mean, I you know, to yeah, and I don't know whether you agree with this or not, but I tend to think it's important as we do our personal work and we seek understanding and acceptance of all people, that we also have an awareness that there are differentials in this knowledge, and there are people who are manipulating other people.
Yes.
There is people throwing, you know, taking this knowledge and manipulating people. So I think that's another really big reason for everyone to do this work and make this this work normalized, right, in everyday
Isn't that
life.
like one of the hardest things to do? What you're saying is to actually go, okay, there's this, like you said, radical acceptance, or this allowance of people's subjective reality, but then at the same time to be that this is a physical, where we are in this physical matrix, and we're here to do something, and we should take right action, and to find out where is right action.
Yeah,
That's but the more you can come into contact with your own unconscious reactivity,
yes,
and try to come down off of that, then the more then you will get closer to right action the more you can do that.
I think
Yes,
that's like one of the most important takeaway really is going back to that idea of how people are really well intentioned and subjectively attaching to causes or missions in the world with good intention, but because of the lack of awareness of what's driving the shadow that's taking over, I guess, that it is creating more chaos instead of the intention they hoped.
Right. Just look at the political movements and stuff. People they don't have to have this level of chaos and war. It doesn't have to be that way. You could just actually just sit down and talk about differences of opinion. But there's so much reactivity, and there's also, like you said, so much parasitism going on that the people who sit down at the table and say, okay, I'm here, I'm your so-and-so politician, and I'm gonna, we're gonna figure this out. They're up there lying and parasiting off the public trust and taking money from such and such group or corporation up there. And they're disingenuous, and you can't actually have a more evolved political situation with those people. You have to actually say, no, you are a genetic psychopath, and you're a liar and a fraud, and you need to get out of the conversation.
Yeah, but see, the fact
so there's some defensive
there is, but that can be even a year ago, I had more of that energy than I have now. And the only reason is because I've had ego crushing like kind of experiences that I really understand now, that the more that we delve of this whole talk about what we're saying about into our own parts. And another thing that we've been studying a lot since we wrote the book, or at least in the last couple of years, is IFS, that's internal family systems.
Me too, I'm studying as well.
Oh, you are? That's great.
Yeah, and it works really, really well to start to look at your shadow and look at the different parts as a family system, which have different needs, different scripts, different programs. And I know that I have a part that is angry at the world, at other people from my own personal trauma, that I wasn't safe. I didn't feel safe. I was manipulated. and all these
Mhm.
things. So
Mhm.
I truly believe, yes, you can be defensive and know that you're being taken advantage of, but at the same time, do it in a way that doesn't give more fuel to the fire.
Right.
Yeah, good point.
That's the
Because
hardest thing. Yes.
yeah, because I do see a lot of people in the movement just, everybody knows that there's these parasites and psychopaths and stuff. But if we just keep focusing on the parasites and the psychopaths, um, it's taking us away from
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
Kind of like
doing
in the
this.
body where you have an immune reaction, right? And so
Mhm.
you're introduced to this outside agent, this viral agent or whatever, and then the body puts up all of its immune defenses,
Mhm.
and that's healthy. But then if it goes overboard, right, then you get what they call a cytokine storm or whatever it is, and then that's where you get all these symptoms that can kill you. Going back to the whole thing with the virus and all that stuff, regardless of the reality of it all and stuff. Just the most basic understanding of immunity is that you actually die from the overuse of your immune system.
Yeah, your defense system kills you
Right.
in the
So
end.
if we look at all of the red pill folks who are sort of on the case with all this and identifying all these parasites and all of these different ways in which they have been manipulating us, that's necessary. That's an immune function that's, our immune system uh, has been, it's been attacked in all these different ways. And so we need to turn that immune function on, and we need to clean this system out. But at the same
Yeah.
time, then what happens is this is like the warrior archetype, and it takes us over. And then
Mhm.
if you get so developed as an
Mhm.
immune function, as a killer
As a
T
fighter.
cell
Mhm.
fighter,
Yeah.
and that's all you think about, and your whole psyche gets taken over, and your brain is all honed in on the warrior archetype, and it's all find enemies and destroy,
Mhm.
and then you orient your whole life in that way, and you're getting
Yeah.
power, and that's part of your gold, and you're good at it and all of that. That's
Mhm.
great. But then you start to, this is one of the fears of becoming psychologically aware. You start to realize how you've been overdoing it, how you've been directing your warrior energy perhaps in a dirty way.
Yeah.
And you've
Yeah.
been casting too wide of a net, and you've been an overkiller.
Like
And
Alex Jones.
like Alex Jones. Alex Jones is a good example of somebody who's serving a necessary immune function, but he's now trapped in this to where
Mhm.
he can't relax and have a normal life anymore.
Mhm.
Right.
And so he's just like on 10,
Mhm.
24/7 or whatever.
Right.
So that's pathological.
Yeah. Being just
And,
one archetype isn't natural or healthy.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
he talks about that a lot, how he wants to stop and just, have his ranch and stuff, but
Right.
he's so
Yeah.
addicted to it that
Yeah.
I don't know if he can, or it probably will just happen to him. But see, that's the extreme. But
it's not to say
yeah.
that he's not serving a proper function,
No.
because you could say,
Mhm.
from the point of view of, you could say, well, uh, you know, God put him there, you could say,
Mhm.
to do this job.
Right.
And now God, and he's going to get burnout doing it. And that's just what it is. That's
Mhm.
what warriors
Mhm.
are there to do. They're there to do a job and to
It's
get burned
destiny.
up in the process. And the next one
Mhm.
comes along.
And if
And
you
so,
are one of those people, and that is your choice, right, to sacrifice aspects of your own life for a cause, that's
Yes.
yes.
you can choose that, right?
Yeah, no, that's if it is
Yeah.
that obviously is his, and it's a lot of these people in the movement. But
Alpha male warrior kind of.
But
Yeah.
anybody who would be watching this podcast as long as we've been on here now would be the type of person who is probably starting to look at these issues and
Yeah. Yeah.
wanting
And
to
seeking
learn.
a balance, perhaps, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
And I think the whole concept of dissolving the divide implies finding a balance. Yeah.
yes.
Derek,
Yeah,
you've been
And
so
quiet.
yeah,
Talk.
yeah. Go ahead,
yeah,
Derek. What's up
I'm
over
just sitting
there?
back. All right, so I was kind of joking around with Leslie earlier, before you guys came on.
Yep.
In regards to, yeah, one of your articles where you're talking about the collectivism and all that, and for me, really trying to, have a pretty reflect deep introspection into things and all that, coupled with, research of, over a decade and all that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, you see, whatever collectivist groups, and you see how over time, if an individual, just gets into these things, they kind of their individuality gets dissolved into the collectivist
Yes.
herd
Into
mentality,
the
if you will,
group.
to kind of dumb it down. And it's
Mhm.
kind of ironic to like dissolving the divide of how like we're more about kind of just dissolving these divisions between these groups, collectivist or not, and on the individual level, because there's so many different aspects that tie into so much of these shadow projections, which is why we love having folks like you guys on to really break these things down on a psychological level, Jungian level. There's so many great philosophers and psychologists and just like researchers that have brought forth so much information and studies on the human psyche that we can really
Right.
learn from, apply to our lives, reflect on how, things have transpired in the past, and, be on the lookout for these things in the future, but especially in the present. So as we're adults and we're on a certain path to just trying to be a better person, mastering ourselves,
Right.
hopefully, because a lot of people seem to bypass that. If you see people on certain platforms speaking about whether be truthful or not, but, in the social media realm, you know, a lot of their words don't match their actions sometimes. And I'm
Mhm.
overgeneralizing, right? It just
Yes.
seems like there's
That's common.
a lot of discord between people, and just
It makes
why does
news, it
even
makes
Oh,
media
Oh
popular.
yeah, the
he
clickbait is
mentioned this
ridiculous. Yeah,
before.
but
This is the infighting you talked about, right?
Mhm.
right, yeah. I'm just
Is that
curious
what you
as to
mean?
why we can't have like more healthy debates. We seem to be like on this, all these digital platforms where people aren't, held accountable as much
Yeah.
as, face-to-face confrontation or, a
Yeah.
debate, hopefully, or were
Yeah.
they going fishing for debate or whatever, right?
Colin
But
wants to actually start.
Come
yeah,
up to your
Oh,
mic, please.
I'm sorry. My
I could have
back
heard you.
is doing what it's. Colin is wanting to. Well, he's going to start what he's calling the Solucio think tank, where he wants
Mm.
to do exactly that. Have healthy, productive.
Wasn't even going to be debates. It was just
But
going to be we were just going to basically pose a
problem
problem or
solving.
a question,
Mhm.
and then find maybe four people, have me plus two, maybe three people max, probably just two, come up, have a powwow. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is the problem. Okay, what if you were, like these think tanks, like the Rand Corporation or all these different think tanks that the globalists have, the Club of Rome or whatever they
Yeah.
are, they pose
Tavistock,
these
yeah,
problems,
Fabian
Tavistock, whatever
Society.
they pose these problems and they say, okay, well, what are we going to do about these? What do you say? Pull together these resources and come up with a plan. All
Love
right,
it.
well, where's our think tanks?
Exactly.
Well, that's why he's going to start it. I
Well,
keep
Yeah.
bugging him about
Jordan
Yeah.
this. I think
Peterson, I
it's a
think
great idea.
That's cool.
Peterson, I think has something going on where he just started something in England, and I don't know what it's called or whatever, but I think it was also sort of a debate or I don't know, a think tank type platform, like a council on foreign relations type thing, but for I don't know how you would describe his kind of or corner of the movement or whatever, but yeah, and so with this idea with me, it would be to bring on red pilled people who are thinkers and start talking about, start having conversations about actually coming up with solutions.
But you would have healthy debate within this. That's how
You
this stuff
would
gets
you would end
worked
up
out.
having
Yeah.
healthy debate. And I also wanted to say to Derek about the infighting and stuff. We call that monkey games.
Hmm.
And if you monkey games,
From the
right?
monkey mind, yeah.
He had a great, yeah, it's true, from the monkey mind. And
I
the
could
monkey
swing that way
mind,
with the amendment.
a bunch of monkey minds get together and they play monkey games. Melissa had a great song actually called Monkey Game. So I can't find the
It
project for-
became the same, it became another song. Yeah.
Yeah. But monkey games are, I read this book, was it Howard Bloom, called The Lucifer Principle, and it was talking about baboon wars. And it was very helpful to see how baboons go to war with each other.
It's nasty.
And it's very, very nasty. It's very, very horrific. And if you start to look at these primate hierarchical dynamics,
Joe Rogan talks about this a lot.
he talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can kind of see where we kind of get this, and that you're gonna have conflict. You're gonna have all the alpha males are gonna have their way of doing conflict. Women are gonna have their way of doing conflict. People are gonna be. It's like, imagine a tree with a bunch of monkeys in there. There's gonna be the top branch monkeys, and there's gonna be the bottom branch monkeys, and everybody's trying to pull on the branch and trying to get to the next branch, and who's gonna share food with who, and who's gonna, have a fight with the other or whatever. It's all these monkey games.
Mhm.
And I think that's where humans are right now. And we play a lot of monkey games, and we're going to be continuing to do that for our whole lives. And I think actually you can't actually stop it, because if you try to repress the energies that contribute to monkey games,
Mhm.
you're just going to end up, you're just going to repress it, and you're going to project it somewhere else. And so you're going to, you're not going to have fights within your own movement, but then you're going to have fights over here with your wife or your husband over here, or
Yeah.
fights at work over
Yeah.
here, or something like that. So you're going to be playing monkey games of some kind or another. So the best thing that you can do is become psychologically aware of where your energy is going and how you're playing these games, and how, there's there's conflict there. You can't avoid conflict. Look in nature. I'm just looking in my backyard, and all little creatures and even plants and stuff, they're having conflict with each other. They're also getting along. It's symbiosis, and they're getting along, but they're also conflicting in certain ways. And human beings are always going to have conflicts with each other. And so, but there is natural conflict that just comes as a matter of circumstance. That's just natural. You can't get away from that. And that's just part of evolution and part of life. And then there's habitual cyclical conflict, where you or other people or groups are constantly creating new conflicts, and they're just projecting their shadow stuff over here, creating a conflict and getting all embroiled in that, and then projecting it over here and getting a conflict over that. And that's where, in Jungian psychology, that's where you have an autonomous complex. And that's where you have a wound. That's where you have, in IFS, you have a part, you have an exiled part. That's where you have some kind of pathological, that's where you have some kind of trauma. And around that trauma, something maladaptive has formed in the psyche that is basically reacting to an old situation that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So when you were a child and you were bullied or whatever, and you had to respond in this way or that way, that was a situation that traumatized you. And then your psyche learned from that. And now you're still running the same cycle over and over and over in life, even though you're not in the playground at school anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Time gets stopped a little bit, right? The age of that event.
It is. These are organic.
Yep. I'm just going to Fix the camera
parts,
just
right?
Yeah, well said.
So they're energy
sure.
systems, organic parts, and they're
Mhm.
alive and they get stuck in time.
Yes.
And so they're running this program habitually and in cycles.
Yes.
And so this is exactly what happens. And this is why you see probably the same people running the same script, so to speak, over and over again, right? With
Yes.
different people. Maybe
Mhm.
they get along with somebody and then the same thing happens.
Oh yeah, a boyfriend, girlfriend.
Or
it
I'm
keeps
just
getting
saying
into
people
relationships,
online
right?
or what they're
Mhm.
talking
Oh,
about, the
mhm.
infighting and all
All of
that.
the above. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that can happen in groups too, because people group together around their shared wound types.
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle calls our autonomous complexes the
The
pain
Trauma
body.
bonding
pain
also.
body.
Sorry.
Pain body. Yeah.
Right, trauma body, pain body, right. And so
I said
the pain,
bonding. Sorry, but yeah.
yeah, we because we would trigger each other otherwise. If we get together, if everybody with the same kind of pain body profile gets together, then we all kind of know, we all kind of project in the same way, we all kind of protect ourselves in the
Protect.
same way, and we all kind of operate psychically on the same level, and so we can kind of get along because we're all wounded. It's like addicts, that stick together, because they all kind of respond to the world in the same way, and they accept each other for that.
Well, like
And
misery
so,
loves company or something, man.
yeah,
God.
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure, right? Yeah.
exactly. So, but this can
Yeah.
happen this can happen at the level of the nation state, right? You can have, I mean, this is what the Germany and the Third Reich and all that, or look at the United States, that the red pill folks, we point to the globalists or to the neocons or whatever.
Israel, Palestine.
Israel,
Mhm.
Palestine. Yeah. So basically, Israel Palestine is stuck. They have an autonomous complex between the two of them, and it's a
Mhm.
victim victor complex that's
Mhm.
running.
Mhm.
And so they both have their aggressor side, their victor side, their aggressor side, and then they have their victim side, right?
Mhm.
And then they
Mhm.
flip and flop on each other. So for a while, the Israelis will be the victim, and the Palestinians will be the aggressor, and then that'll flip, and then the
Mhm.
Israelis will be the overkilling aggressor, and the Palestinians will be the victim, and they will
Mhm.
just flip flop back and forth, and both parties are energized by this whole game, and the
Mhm.
individuals within these countries are plugged into that whole thing. That's their shared pain body, their cousins
Yes.
that are
Yes.
involved in this rivalry.
Mhm.
This is Cain and Abel kind of rivalry,
Yeah.
and they have a shared wound, and they're not at the level collectively to be able to figure it out yet. So
Yeah.
they're just, and then
Yeah.
America does the same thing, or going around the world, bullying everybody and projecting, terrorist and
Mhm.
this and that onto other people, and we
Mhm.
know the whole thing and stuff, and creating false flag events and all this kind of stuff. That same dynamic of some small group of psychopaths creates a false flag event, gets everybody to react and say, do something about that, go get the enemy. That same thing is happening in the psyches of individuals who are wounded and have a
Yes.
complex that's running within them, and you find them constantly
Yeah.
inventing new conflicts and getting themselves embroiled in all of
Yeah.
this. It's the same. It's as above, so below.
Yeah. Brilliant. And it seems to me that the bottom line is, in order to change those like group experiences, collective experiences, that it comes back to the individual doing their shadow work. Is that be true?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It has to come back. Jung was always talking about this. It has to come back to the individual, but the individual needs tools, and
Yeah.
uh, it's not everybody's role, like we were talking about earlier, to be some kind of a shaman or something,
Mhm.
like Carl Jung or whatever, a
Mhm.
200 IQ or whatever it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's not ever. So we have to I would say that a religion that lasts thousands of years actually has a functional toolkit for being able to process wounds and heal themselves in some way or another. And the kind of dark side of that might be, let's say, in the Christian world, where you would say, well, one of the ways in which Christians deal with their wounding and their repressed rage, because it's not Christian to get angry at other people and start wars with other people, so they come up with some rationale for why those other people are heathens and why they need to be converted and stuff. And then they get involved in these crusades, and then they get to release all their repressed rage in a way that God says it's okay.
Right.
Or the Muslims do it with the terrorists or whatever it is. And so,
is that the cognitive dissonance underlying that? Would you say?
Oh, yeah. Whenever there's shadow projection, group projection like that, there's always a mass psychosis, a mass, let's say a mass denial of their own hypocrisy, of their own projection. That has to be in there, because otherwise that would stop them. They would say, hey, guys, we're over here in South America converting these heathens, and we're doing it through force, and we're killing people, and that's not Christ-like. We better stop. But they shoved it out of their mind. They said no, because they were taken over by this shadow energy that needed to go somewhere. So what we have to develop is, if we don't want to do that anymore, if we don't want to, because we have these monkey genetics, and if we don't want to keep slaughtering each other and fighting with each other and nursing these wounds that cause us to act out like this, well, we better adopt some kind of psychospiritual toolkit that we can use so that we can process this energy in place and stop projecting it onto the world and stop destroying each other. And what Jung did is he said, hey, here's the basics of a toolkit that we could use to do that. And everyone said, what? I can't hear you. What? He didn't say anything. And they just acted like he didn't say anything. And so there has to be, and so I'm, one of the things I'm actually writing in this, I'm writing a little short book, and it's for red pill people, to introduce them to Jungian psychology and some other ideas that I think could be helpful for people. Also integral theory. And it's just sort of a little primer kind of. But I kind of felt like I've had this intuition that the average person who's, they're so afraid of their own shadow and afraid of the shadow of the collective that, that you can't even talk to them about this kind of stuff. But the person who's red-pilled, so to speak, the person who's awakened to the parasitic side of the matrix and has looked around and said, oh, wait a minute, there's a bunch of psychopaths. There's all these corrosive, all this laws and corruption, people taking money and all this, it's just gross stuff all over the place. Those people have kind of been inoculated to evil. They're actually now, instead of just putting evil on the Iranians or on the Iraqis or on bin Laden or on the Jews or on the Palestinians, instead of doing that, the red-pilled individuals say, no, evil is all around us. It's in the city council. It's here. It's there. It's all over the place. So I feel like those folks are perhaps primed already, initiated already into the dark side of reality. And so then the next step is to go, hey, we're all part of this transmitting, receiving type of operation, like back to the virus analogy. We're all carriers and of the virus of evil, of the shadow as it manifests in the world. Evil as we know it could be just redefined as the movement of shadow energy from the individual psyche into the world, into the collective.
Yeah.
You could just take evil as we understand it and go, oh, It is the human shadow, unknown to us, moving through us personally and collectively under the veil of consciousness and displacing and dumping its internal entropy into the world. It's a dumping mechanism for dumping all of this aggression and lust and rage and everything else that's in the shadow. And
It's an energy
so,
loose.
yeah, it is. And so if we could now take these red-pilled folks, all of us, and go, okay, well, we've already been initiated into the dark side of the collective. Now let's go into the dark side of the personal and figure out all the ways that we're dumping our own junk into the world and start working on that, start talking to each other about it with a common language, and, you know, and start to, as Jung would say, rescind our projections. We don't really know how that's going to go. We haven't done that. There's never been a spiritual or secular movement that takes full responsibility for the movement of the shadow and the types of behavior that lead to repressed shadow material, child raising styles, and the whole the 9-to-5 work week, and the wage slave lifestyle, and all of this stuff that creates all this repressed anger and grief.
Yeah, gosh, you're really putting together the pieces of this so clearly. I really appreciate how you do it.
And one thing you could use this, and I've been doing this in this new book, is I've been using Ken Wilber's integral system, just the 4 quadrants part of it, and you just take his 4 quadrants and kind of simplify it. And I've simplified it down to mind, body, culture, and civilization or society. And we talk about the shadow in the
that's on your website, right?
It's it's on the website. So we talk about the shadow as a problem of the mind, of the psyche. That's the upper left-hand quadrant. But when you keep repressing all this garbage and you don't face it, it leads to the stuff on the right-hand quadrant, the disease and psychosomatic symptoms in the body. And then that leads to all the culture wars and all the mimetic wars and all of the the fake news and propaganda and all the culture war stuff. And then that also is represented in the society itself, in the way the legal system is designed, and the way the corporate system is designed, and the way laws work, and the way the physical footprint of our civilization. This shadow garbage is represented across all of human reality. But the place where you put a stop to it, or you don't really put a stop to it so far, but you bring awareness to it, you start to put it in check, at least to start to put it in check, is in your own self, back into the individual. And so that's kind of that's the project, and we've never seen that ever done in the history of mankind. No group has ever become aware of how the shadow works. We've projected into demons or projected into other groups. We've never become aware and then said, okay, let's together as a movement do this work and see what happens.
That's exciting to think of it that way, because that opens the possibility of doing it. And it brings me back to your original intro about how you guys came together as artists. And I think that through artistry, like you said, it brings people together to harmonize and work together. It's a good model for bringing individuals together to create alchemy and to create a new creation. And that's what we're here to do.
Work on ourselves together in relationship.
There we go. Yeah, ultimately, in order for a band to stay together, right? How many bands break up? You have to work on yourself, right? It's like a little microcosm, right? And so it's also this idea of creativity and that's required for alchemy, this merging of existing things to create something that doesn't exist yet. And we're on the precipice of this opportunity to create something absolutely new in the world. And I think that you're really talking about, from just my limited ability to understand things,
No, you can understand us fully. I know you can.
Yeah,
something,
totally.
this tool, this model to create a new world, I guess, and that
At
people
least
need
advance ourselves. At least
advance
evolve a step.
to evolve. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Right. And that's coming back to realism and, being
Right.
too, rose colored. And
Right.
you mentioned before about people need a toolkit, and I'm guessing that you guys in your program are offering a toolkit of some sort, or at least guiding.
So
Yeah.
Colin is writing this book right now, and he has part of the toolkit in there.
Yeah, the Shadow Tech, the original book, which you can still get for free if you sign up for our mailing list at shadowtechalchemy.com. That book, 2015, has a lot of this same material, actually, a lot of it. And some stuff in this book is not, in one and not in the other or whatever. This book is going to be, by the time it's done, it's going to be like an 80-page little thing, but it's probably still couldn't read it in 2 hours because, you gotta hit all this stuff and think about it and go, oh, okay. But short, to the point, and then there's going to be references in there to where you can, if different ideas resonate with you or you want to know more, I'll point you to an author and here's a book that you can start with on that or whatever. So yeah, that should be available soon. I tried to write that a year ago and I couldn't do it. It was just wasn't working. Now I think it is going to work. I think it's almost done now. I just got to comb through it and
The
fix a bunch
other
of stuff.
thing
So
is,
that will be out. Yeah.
yeah, and we have done some workshops in the past, and we will do more.
Yeah.
People can just email us, and then they can be on
We'll
the
put you-
list. And then when we have enough
Mhm.
people that are interested in doing it, we'll do another one. The other thing is Colin is an incredible coach.
Oh.
He
Oh, I do coaching.
yeah, he has helped a lot of people, and
Basically help them with the toolkit, really just
Y-
use the toolkit.
yeah, but
Mhm.
he has helped me incredibly, and he's just
Well, you have helped me incredibly because I could not have advanced over the last 10 years. And I got, there's that phrase of the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know.
yeah.
Uh,
Right
yeah.
now, yeah, for me, myself, I'm always here to help. Somebody can email me, and if I can help you
Well, I
in
think you're a good coach too, and you
in
have
whatever
you have
way.
your new Living Gold program, and
Mhm.
she's taking folks that we know who have kind of heroic stories, who are not famous people, and letting them tell their stories.
Like
on
Sarah
her
Cross
program.
and Stephanie Mo
Yeah.
Davis.
Mhm.
These
Yeah,
are
exactly.
our
It's-
friends
Exactly.
as
and
well, for sure.
and
Yeah.
blessing these
Oh,
folks
yeah.
and letting them tell their story.
But
Sorry.
the other thing for me, because I'm going through a new journey with this, whatever you want to, say what cancer is, none of us really even knows. But I'm doing a Give, Send, Go campaign right now. I would like to go to Germany to this clinic called Arcadia um, for integrative cancer therapy instead of doing the stuff here, which is kind of
Oh, yeah.
been a negative experience so
Mhm.
far.
Yeah.
And I don't have any funds, so it's it
She's doing a
anybody.
fundraiser for
Yeah.
that. And I have we could have a conversation another time about what cancer is or where this all came from and her and relation to her. And that would
Oh,
actually
yeah.
be a good talk, actually.
Well, it's a root. I mean, I know the root of it
Yeah.
is the post trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've been working on that. But there was more layers to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
For all
pretty
of us.
amazing.
This thing showed up a year ago and just took her and
It
uh,
just, took over my whole existence. So it's just
Mm.
been going deep, deep, deep.
and developing your faith and learning to let go and
Mhm.
let go and let God, so to speak.
Oh yeah,
has
definitely
been
my
the biggest thing on this.
yeah, surrender to a source greater than you
Yeah.
that's running things.
Yeah.
And then how hard the ego is trying to control your life.
Yeah.
You know.
It
Yeah.
fights, it wants to constantly problem solve and, oh, try this medicine, try this doctor, try this, try that, blah, blah, blah. And
Fight,
just
fight,
keeps
fight.
running,
Ugh. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And you've got to, and then to let go and just to go, no, you just say, my body can cure this.
Mhm, mhm.
And then you go, okay, well, all right, I'm going to allow my body to
Well,
cure this. I'm going to let go.
he's not
Then-
in.
I'm not in your body.
I
But then you try to let go, and then you see all these destructive scripts running.
Yeah.
More than
And,
that.
and then you go, uh-oh, they're actually exacerbating or creating the problem in the first place.
Yeah, well, it's quite an involved
Yeah, well, we could have to
situation.
talk
But
about that.
anyway, so
Yeah.
that's where I'm at, but we're always here to help. So
Yeah. Yeah.
feel free.
We're all on
to
this road
call us.
together,
Yes,
really.
yes.
And thank you for sharing, such a personal aspect of your lives. And I really appreciate your dynamic together, what you offer together. I love the duo.
Thank you, Leslie.
Mhm.
And what you bring and how it's so really beautiful to see how you work together with each other. It's really clear you've talked together many times and offer this very comfortable flow. It's very
Yeah,
beautiful.
we're like I don't know, Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield from Metallica. I thought of Metallica because there's this Metallica movie that came out 20 years ago, and they were trying to make an album, and they're all fighting with each other, and they had a psychiatrist coming to band practices with them. And
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah, they're
trippy.
having arguments about whether or not we don't need this psychiatrist. What the hell is this? You pussies. Why do you need a psychiatrist? And I'm thinking, no, this is good. You guys do need a psychiatrist. And this is
Right,
good.
we all need one. Maybe
you
not a
guys are-
psychiatrist. They prescribe too many drugs.
I wouldn't. Yeah, right. A psychologist. I don't know if he's a psychiatrist. He's a psychologist at least. And yeah, we're like we're artists, and we're kind of two peas in a pod, and we've been doing this together, and we've wondered if the pod was supposed to break up or whatever. It was like a chemical vessel, and I've kept saying, no, don't break the vessel, don't break the vessel. It wants to sometimes break, and it wants to, so that, because it's so hard to be in a conscious relationship where the other person can see what's going on and keeps bringing you back to yourself.
Yeah,
And
it's
you
hard
want to run
work.
away from that.
Yeah, 24/7. That's exhausting, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been difficult, but it's also grown us up a lot. So
Yeah.
Totally.
Good metaphor for life itself, I think.
I'd rather have that than an unconscious relationship. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm hearing a lot of people talking now about the whole problem with people now not having relationships. They're online, they're dating online, and all this kind of stuff, or they're watching pornography or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. You have to have relationships with people, especially with the opposite sex. You have to be in relationship. I mean, if you're not
To grow at
for
a
a
certain
period, you
To
can be
grow.
alone for a while, and that's good.
At a certain point,
You
relationship is part of the individuation, is part of the growth.
Yeah, the catalyst, for the growth, and it brings the shadow material out to be dealt with.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to be in a relationship. Yeah.
So I think we're at a kind of a natural winding down
Okay.
point, and
we are.
And I think this is the opportunity for you to share anything more about what you offer and where people can find it, and make any final points.
What do you say, Melissa?
Oh, well, just thank you all for doing this.
Thank you guys for having us and for inviting us into your tribe.
And
Our
it's
pleasure.
a great,
pleasure.
it's,
Honor,
it's a great name, dissolving the divide. We do need to do that, especially in this movement now. We need to get together and have healthy debate and talk about these subjects that are, that are very difficult And I appreciate you guys doing that.
Yeah.
You can get in touch with us at shadowtechalchemy.com. You can email us. Like I said, Colin is an amazing coach. So.
She's pushing my coach
Well,
tonight.
because he
Get 'em.
doesn't do it. So if he's not going to do it, because I just think he's helped, he's helped people, and he has a way of being able to help people problem solve. So
Yeah, and especially in this area, I was actually, like I mentioned before, I was actually part of a group that existed 15 years ago, where they taught a lot of stuff that was like natural law. It was kind of like the predecessor to the current kind of meme around that. And yeah, and so I was my kind of deal for a while was, for several years, was helping people who were in foreclosure. And I kind of became an expert in foreclosure legal procedure and putting together analysis papers for people's lawyers, and to help them go to court to fight banks and stuff after the 2008 crisis and all of that. But what I kept on doing with that is I kept on bringing people, they'd call me and they'd be like, okay, can you help me with this case or with this, or analyze my mortgage papers or whatever. And I would end up having a relationship with them, talking to them, and finding out what was in the background behind
what
their
was at the
foreclosure.
root of it?
What was at the root of it?
Psychologically, yeah.
And you start finding out, oh, well, I just had a divorce, or my husband has legal medical problems, or my so-and-so's become a drug addict or whatever. There was all this background material that was going on. And so I started naturally to start trying to help people see how, well, you think, you're in this fight against the bank to hold on to your house. And this is the house that you raised your children in. And they're scammers and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. But, you have all this other personal muck that's going on in your life. And you're using this fight as a distraction away from this more important stuff. And maybe you should just let go of the house. Maybe you should just, go move into a rental, and maybe you're going to lose that money or whatever it is. And maybe that's okay. Maybe you're looking in the wrong direction here. And I would always try to turn them inward and all of that. And most of them didn't like that.
Because they weren't calling, they weren't calling him for that.
They weren't calling me for
But
that.
since
No.
that time, he's helped others
Yeah.
who are wanting to work on, some of their
Yeah.
stuff, their shadow.
But that's where it started. So, and then
Yeah.
I've been coaching.
Yeah, and that's cool. You
people
saw
on,
that from way back then. Yeah, for sure. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
he's
Well,
natural.
Taking that
my
approach.
buddy, well, my parents were like hippie intellectuals, and so there was Carlos Castaneda, and
Oh,
there
shit.
was Joseph
Catch you
Chilton
later.
Pierce, and there was Carl Jung, and there was Alan Watts, and all that kind of stuff on the bookshelf. And right, and so
Also, we have our music side too,
Yeah.
just so anybody knows. So there's his band's is Vile, extreme
oh yeah, I
metal
got a
band.
extreme metal band called Vile.
Still tours in
Okay,
the
cool.
summer, going back
Nice.
to
yeah.
Europe this
Awesome.
June
Yep.
for Obscene Extreme Festival
Yep.
in the Czech Republic,
Yep.
and probably a couple other shows. I have
Awesome.
my own website, melissamarimusic.com, where you
Right.
can
Excellent.
see I was doing kind of red pill metal, if you want to call it
Nice.
Yeah,
anything.
P
It's-
program
Cool, yeah,
matrix.
yeah, I had- Yeah. So
We need all genres doing this.
yeah, so we do that too.
That's awesome.
Yep, and there's a new little book coming out. We will do workshops again, but so people can email us about that. We'll do more of those.
Is that
And-
the Zoom workshop that you do?
Well,
Is
those
that-
were just a community thing kind of we were doing, but now we decided that we would just do workshops instead. So that they'd be more, because, when people you know, even if it's only a small amount of money, there's something like investing
Yeah.
in doing
That's
the
the word,
work.
Even if
yeah,
it's like
sure.
$100 or whatever. you
It
know,
makes
just-
you
it-
more serious about doing the work. That's the
Yeah, it
most
holds people
important thing.
accountable to, put your money where your mouth is kind of thing. So people got to show
Exactly.
up if
Yeah.
they're gonna, yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah, no,
excellent.
good on
make
you.
it
It's a better
affordable,
model.
but
Y'all
yeah.
deserve that, for sure.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And thank you so much
Yeah,
for.
I hope we work. I don't
Yeah.
know if we worked out the whole thing with the infighting and the monkey.
Oh no, no
themes.
worries.
This
What
was
up?
awesome. I loved
Yeah,
this
totally.
conversation. Yeah.
It's a cool path we
Great,
took.
thank
I'll
you.
just conclude on the whole infighting thing because,
Yeah.
what the shadow work really involves is resolving and dissolving all these inner conflicts we have within ourselves. And that's why you see probably a lot of times, infighting in the external domain because a lot of people haven't resolved the internal conflicts they have going on within themselves. And
Mhm.
just, yeah, it sucks. We're at an onslaught of information and disinformation, misinformation, all these things that we always got to disseminate, alchemize, and all these things. It's kind of like
Discern.
that daily grind in a sense. So yeah, just to be balanced in that within yourself, it's just going to have a great ripple effect out in the, with our brothers and sisters, because, we're trying to be on this path of common ground together, building upwards towards, more sovereign, hermetically sealed society and shit. So that's all I have to say about that.
Derek's a lover, and so he wants to bring everybody together. That's why you probably like Robert Moore's system, where you got the king,
yeah.
the warrior, the magician, and the lover. You're a lover magician, and
What?
you want to
Yeah.
bring people
Yes, true.
together and say, why can't these people just get along? And what's the problem? We're all on the same page anyway. Why can't we have a nice symbiotic community? But the shadow warrior wants to fight all the time, and he gets a lot of energy off of that. And the meaning in his
Right.
life is directed around fighting and protecting and who's wrong and all
Like
that
Mark
stuff.
Passio.
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting with Mark. I realize now, kind of looking over at Mark, because I remember looking at him years ago. I didn't really notice. I wasn't really sure what Mark's deal was or what was going on over there. And because, like I said, I was kind of part of that movement like 15 years ago before Mark showed up. And Mark, I mean, like I told you, I like Alex Jones. So Mark is also, like a strong alpha male warrior type, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not offended by that.
Mhm.
I like that. I'm like, that's cool. This guy's taking responsibility.
Mhm.
So, and so I'm not even sure where I kind of know the gist of what Mark's talking about. And I've looked at a documentary of his as a couple hours where we kind of went over a lot of his principles. I know he's very wide and talks about a lot of stuff. I don't know personally what's going on kind of in the core of his family, his
yeah.
tribe or whatever, or how that works or anything about him, or if there's any dark
Mhm.
stuff that's leaking out, or I don't know any of that kind of stuff. I generally, when I look over there, I'm like, okay, well, that's positive, what
Mhm.
he's doing. The only thing I would say about is that it can start to verge on the fundamentalist.
Mm.
And right, and when you start to say, okay, when you get these warrior guys that are like, this is reality, this is the way it works, and you need to
Mhm.
know, then it starts to kind of get into the fundamentalist, starts to get kind of objectifying everything, and kind of the nuance falls away. I don't know if that's happening with him or not, but that can tend to happen.
I think it's accurate.
Yeah, and then you have the true believers, and they're like, no, this is what he says is right, and you need to atone and all of this. And then you have the people who are, wanting to fight, and they're wanting to joust and knock him off of his monkey branch. You're too
Yeah.
high up on the monkey tree, and I got to knock you down, and all of this. And here's all the places where you're wrong or where you're bad. And,
Mhm.
so all those games go
Yeah.
on and stuff, and folks like that type of personality type, they attract that.
Yeah.
That's they're attracting that naturally. They're like, hey, I'm the monkey up on the top branch, and I'm your natural law, alpha monkey here. And so, that can tend to happen. So to me, I'm not a groupie. I'm not a group person of any
Yeah.
kind or whatever. And so
Yeah.
to me,
Yeah, neither
I'm
of
like,
us.
and she's not either. Okay, what is this guy, I think he's obviously, what I can tell about him is he's brilliant. He does his research. He's dedicated. He's experienced in all these ways. He's got some kind of toolkit that could be very useful.
Mhm.
And now, if you could just take his toolkit and go, okay, thanks for the toolkit. You gave me a Phillips screwdriver. You gave me a monkey wrench. You gave me a hammer. You gave me these things. You know, it takes a lot more than these 10 tools, you know, to build a house or whatever. But thank you. And
Mhm.
now maybe I'm going to take another toolkit from over here. Maybe I'm going to work on my own toolkit.
Yeah.
And like it's like, I recommend that people start to write down their own manifesto of ethics. Write down, I'm going to put mine in my book. And, you know, here's my manifesto of ethics. And you write yours and stuff and figure out where you are and what's right and what's wrong for you. Make your own toolkit, use other people's toolkits, pull it all together. And if you're in that mode as an alchemist, as an artist who's, you know, building your own code of ethics, well, then Mark will probably be very helpful to you, but then other people will be helpful to you. If you're looking for a tribe of a group to join and a leader, and you're looking to be an evangelical and you're, or, you know, a Puritan or whatever, well, then that's going to be, you're going to look at him in another way.
Right.
And I don't really know. I'm just not close enough to that. But I kind of see how these groups work.
Yeah, you're pretty
He did do a
tapped in.
presentation called Fake Ass Christians, so that wouldn't fly too much. Maybe
Fake-ass
some flying
Christian.
monkeys heading that way, maybe.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Oh, you're very
Yeah, I think-
astute, I'll just say.
I was part
I like that,
I was
though.
part of a group
Right
where
on,
it was
Colin.
kind of, you know, I saw these same kind of dynamics, and sociopaths snuck in there too. And so you had some sociopaths in
Right.
there. You had a
Yeah.
lot of true believers in there.
Yeah.
A lot of people got themselves into a lot of trouble. And the group I was in, there was people that were trying to use IRS forms to get the IRS to kick them back money. That stupid. They were just doing stupid stuff.
So we all got to
And
keep our eyes open to when
Oh.
we're interacting with all of
these
this, yeah.
groups then become they become their own, they become cults.
Yeah.
And then they can be very dangerous. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that's happening over there with him or not or whatever, but
Yeah, I don't think so.
you know,
Pe-
so
pe-
I'm
people will
totally
accuse
neutral.
that. People will accuse him of having a cult, but I think that's
Oh.
part of that attack. that
Yeah, I don't
counter-
From what I
Yeah,
saw, he
no,
looks like a
he's
total
not.
individualist.
Yeah, he
right?
is totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, without
An
a doubt.
anarchist,
Yeah.
individualist, right?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
probably would not feel comfortable in a cult.
No. He
Yeah,
he
like,
he acts his
that
story.
was his story.
I
Yeah.
know he
right.
left
Yeah.
the cult.
I
yeah.
know
he
that,
left
yeah,
some satanic organization. Yeah. So he's
I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw him on Alex Jones, and
Yeah.
I saw a documentary of his, and I kind of was reminded of this other movement that I was a part of, and I'm like, okay, I kind of see where that's at, but
Yeah.
I'm not too close enough.
yeah.
know,
Well,
like-
anyway, this is great conversation
Yeah.
and
Okay, so
all
this
about
is,
dissolving the divide here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
guys so much, both of you. And
Yeah,
if,
likewise, y'all.
and if you guys want to get on with us, in one of our programs, just, we'll do that too.
Yeah, I would love
Yeah,
that.
I'd love to. Fuck
Yeah.
Okay.
all right,
Very
Let's
much.
do it.
awesome.
All right, guys.
Okay,
well, thank
well,
you
we'll s-
again, Melissa
Yeah, I
and
gotta
Colin.
stand up.
Where are you,
Check
Derek?
out
Are you
Shadow
in
Tech
France?
Alchemy. Yes.
Is Derek
Mais
in
oui,
France?
mon ami. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Right by
Yeah,
Marseille, all the
Yeah.
way.
All right. Well, I don't know what time it is there, but
It's late. I could see his eyelids starting to droop a
That's
little
like
bit. It's not bad.
10:30, you know. It's
Not
Oh,
bad.
okay.
Usually we
Okay.
meet later, and it's a lot later for him.
Oh,
He's a
yeah.
trooper. It doesn't matter what time of day.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's
Almost.
fantastic. Thank you.
I'm flexible.
All right,
yeah.
guys. Bye.
Thank-
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you
you
all.
so
Okay.
much. Appreciate
Much love,
it.
y'all.
Bye,
Yeah.
guys.
See you online.
All
Okay,
right.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
buddy. Yeah, take care.
Bye. Jung would say that because we're dividing off portions of ourselves that we can't accept and pushing them down into the unconscious, into the shadows, so to speak, then that is the sort of the core source of neurosis or of mental illness.